Morning, welcome everyone. I can see the lobby is filtering into the live room, so welcome everyone. It is fantastic to see so many of you interested in this topic. Today we've got an hour and a half together and we're going to be covering Ofwat and Spring interactive workshops. So this is all around knowledge sharing and how we can create a culture of knowledge sharing in the sector, and specifically vision and best practice principles that both Ofwat and Spring have created with the sector. So welcome to you all. I'll be talking through the agenda shortly, but what I'm going to do is just give a bit of context before I get into that agenda. So as you all know, over the past 5 years, innovation has become really prominent in the sector. The challenges of climate change, population growth, aging infrastructure, all demanding faster and more efficient problem solving. And innovation is one of the vehicles to help with that. Back in 2019, Ofwat observed that there was some good regional efforts happening with innovation, but there was duplication happening due to a lack of coordination between all the parties involved. So in response to that, a few enabling activities were created. Two to mention here. The Ofwat Fund was designed to unleash a wave of innovation across the sector and tackle some of our major challenges through collaborative projects. And Spring Innovation was created as the Innovation Centre of Excellence, with an objective to enable effective delivery of innovation and collaboration by creating centralised intelligence. The fund has been running for 4 years now. It's creating a wealth of innovation insights for the sector. And the criteria of winning funds is that the results will be shared to ensure all customers benefit from investment, hence this conversation around knowledge sharing. Spring has been running for 2 years now, and one of the ways we're creating centralised intelligence is by increasing knowledge sharing in the sector. So you all have access to information on what already exists and how best to implement it. So together, Ofwat and Spring have got aligned missions in this space to accelerate problem solving. So it made sense for us to partner and work together on knowledge sharing. Specifically, we wanted to focus in on creating a culture of knowledge sharing across the sector. So we partnered on this piece of work to do a few things. One was understand the current state of knowledge sharing in the sector. So how are we sharing? What are we sharing? We wanted to increase understanding of the requirements of the fund around knowledge sharing, but we also wanted to specifically have actions around how we can work together to do better in this space. So that's really going to be the focus of today. The key takeaways from the conversation that we had across the sector was that there's good one-to-one knowledge sharing happening, but what we need more is strategic knowledge sharing. So sharing to the right audiences, sharing the right information. It also became clear that we all have different expectations around knowledge sharing. So what good looks like was different to every person that we spoke to. So there was a consistent ask of Ofwat and Spring to align expectations in this space. So we wanted to share what does best practice look like. And that's why we've worked together on a vision and a set of best practice principles to help align on expectations in the sector. So we're excited to be sharing more on that with you today. With any vision and set of principles, though, creating them alone doesn't evoke change. It's in the implementing and the embedding. That's where change is really evoked. So we're working with the sector in a number of ways to implement and embed this vision and best practice, so that we're all aware of it and that we can all make change. This workshop is one of the ways that we're doing that. So today we wanted to do more than just share that vision and set of principles with you. We wanted to bring to life some real life examples of where best practice knowledge sharing is happening. So really excited that we have 2 examples of projects that have delivered best practice knowledge sharing over the past few months so that we can bring that to life for you. Before I share the agenda for today, though, I just want to share a little bit about who is on the call, because when we talk about knowledge sharing, the audience is really important. So we've actually had 150 registrations to this call. We have had people register from 15 of the UK and Ireland water companies. We've got a large contingent of suppliers, including large corporations, small startups, academia, as well as a lot of international guests. So a big welcome to all of you on the call. This session is equally important whether you are from a water company or a supplier or for other. We can all benefit from increased knowledge sharing. Also really pleased to see that international group of attendees joining us, because as we all rally our efforts across the globe about solving similar problems, we need to be sharing our knowledge with each other so that there isn't global duplication of efforts happening as well. Okay, so let's look at the agenda for today. What are we going to cover? So I'm going to give you an introduction to our speakers shortly. We're going to go into the importance of knowledge sharing and launching the principles themselves, as well as giving you a bit of detail around the vision and the 6 principles that we've created. Then we'll go into those real life examples that I talked about. So we've got a couple of case studies for you. We have Anglian Water Enabling Whole Life Carbon Project and United Utilities OP project. Both projects that have been delivering best practice knowledge sharing. So the project teams are here to share their journey. Then we're going to go into breakout rooms, and we're going to split everybody on the call into different rooms so that we can actually have a discussion with those project teams and some of our speakers around knowledge sharing. So get questions ready for them. This is going to be an interactive Q&A session within those breakout rooms. We want you to be able to ask all your questions to fully understand what best practice knowledge sharing looks like. We'll then come back into a big group again, and we'll do a bit of a feedback session. So I'll ask each of the facilitators of those breakout rooms, as well as other of you on the call, if you want to contribute, into what did you learn in those breakout sessions. And then I will come back and wrap up again with some future steps and implementation. So where do we go next with the knowledge sharing work? Okay, so in terms of speakers today, very excited that we have a fantastic group of people from across the sector to share their experience around knowledge sharing. So we have Mark Hannis from Ofwat, who will be sharing more on the importance of knowledge sharing and Ofwat's perspective of knowledge sharing. Jeanette Henderson from Ofwat will be joining our breakout sessions and will be around to answer questions. Kieran Brocklebank will be joining us to share more on his view of the state of play of knowledge sharing in the sector. And then we've got our project team. So we have Laura Jones and Alexander Herridge from Anglian Water, who will be sharing the journey that they went on with the Whole Life Carbon project and knowledge sharing there, as well as Richard Clark from United Utilities, who will be sharing his journey of knowledge sharing with the OLT-P project. So, as I said, please get your questions ready for those breakout sessions. This will be interactive. Any questions that go into the chat, we will try and answer along the way, or we will try and capture for after the session and share more with you. At the end of the session, when we're wrapping up, I will be sharing links on resources for you to use. So there will be some practical follow-ups for you towards the end. But my ask of all of you is engage, enjoy the session, take the information on, ask questions, and use the expertise that we have on the call. So with that in mind, I am going to hand over to Mark Hannis from Ofwat to share his views on the importance of knowledge sharing in the sector. Thanks, Mark.
Lovely. Thank you, Carly. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so I'm Mark Hannis and I'm part of the Ofwat team, which looks after the Innovation Fund, and I'd like to also extend a warm welcome from our end. Also, it's really fantastic to see so many people on the call today. So yeah, I'm going to spend a few minutes describing how we've got to this point today, and then talk a little bit about the importance of knowledge sharing before handing over to Kieran to get into the vision and principles in a little bit more detail. So hopefully that slide change has worked. So the Innovation Fund then, how did we get here? The Innovation Fund was announced nearly 5 years ago. Our first competition opened a year later in January 2021, and since then we've funded £150 million worth of innovation activity across a wide range of areas, from looking at solutions to the big issues like reducing spills, reducing leakage, decarbonising the wastewater treatment process, to funding innovation activity in areas the sector is a little less mature in, such as nature-based solutions, open data, the circular economy, and many, many more. The fund has supported innovation across the board. And when we first set the fund up, we didn't give a huge amount of thought to what we would do with all the data and information we would collect. The prospects of a completed project were so far down the line that we hadn't properly considered the implications of that, really. So what do you do when a project finishes? What do you do with all that learning? What do you do with those outputs? How do you tell the story of each of the projects and the potential impact they could have? All of those sort of what happens next questions, basically. We hadn't really given much thought to them. Having said that, we had established from the outset a guiding principle for the fund about sharing information to ensure that customers up and down the country who were paying for the fund had a chance to benefit from an innovation developed in the southwest as much as they would from one in the northeast. The innovations we were funding had to have some sort of universal applicability so that they could be picked up by a water company elsewhere. But to be picked up by others, they needed to be really good at knowledge sharing. And as the fund matured and we began to appreciate more the importance of knowledge sharing, we adjusted the competition application process to put more emphasis on the knowledge sharing elements, requiring projects to think carefully about how they would do this. And actually, as time went on, put forward a detailed plan via their submission on how exactly they would do knowledge sharing. So we were trying to really move away from knowledge share being that sort of afterthought, the thing you do because you have to at the end, and make it a more central core piece of the project. And at the same time as this, Spring was sort of establishing itself, going from strength to strength, and they had identified knowledge sharing as a core part of its service offering too. And this offering developed from that standard knowledge share service, which included the knowledge library and the showcases, to offering a more bespoke premium service to really support projects produce the best knowledge sharing opportunities and materials as possible. And alongside this, Ofwat and Spring were meeting regularly, and we were sharing insights with one another about what we were hearing from around the sector about the challenges and barriers to information sharing. It became more and more apparent that some guidance from the centre around expectations might really help unlock more and better quality knowledge sharing. And so around this time last year, we began working on the knowledge sharing vision and principles for the sector. And this involved individual interviews with senior leaders in water companies, and group sessions with innovation leads to help shape what that vision and what those principles would be. We then played those early thoughts back to those audiences, further refined them, and then in the summer, we officially launched them. And as the knowledge sharing vision and principles were being finalised at Ofwat, and with the help of our delivery partners, we were thinking very carefully about how we could do better on that point I made earlier, about making best use of all the data that we were collecting. As we were adding more and more projects to the portfolio, and now some of them were finishing at last, the amount of information we were collecting was just growing and growing and growing. And we needed to find outlets for that to support the knowledge sharing ethos. So I'll just spend a moment talking a little bit about what we're doing in this space as well. So here's a few examples. So we've started to publish thematic learning reports, and our first two are on circularity in water and supporting water efficient communities. These are deep dives, I suppose, into these themes, exploring the projects that we funded in these areas, what else is happening internationally, and then reflecting on where things might go next in these subject areas. We're actually working on a couple more of these at the moment, which we hope will be ready for publication in January or February in the new year. So please do watch this space. We also publish an annual report. This usually goes out in July, and it sets out the fund activities across the previous year. It includes interesting participation data, common challenges that water companies have faced, some of our own reflections, and critically information about the funded projects which have completed that year. And again, we hope this is another helpful vehicle for information sharing. In addition, we've published on our website an open data piece on competition entries, enabling anyone to analyse the data, draw up patterns and trends and so on. And we've been really pleased to see that some of this analysis has appeared on LinkedIn independently to the fund itself. So we haven't commissioned it. People have taken that and done something really interesting with it. So that's really good news. We also publish quarterly project updates on the website, enabling not just the sector, but customers and anybody to really keep in touch with developments, particularly in those projects they might have a strong interest in. And then there's a couple of things that we do which we can't share publicly, but we're also trying to support water companies by sharing information we've gathered via the monitoring program that we run. So for example, a lessons learned database, which features every single recorded piece of learning we've collected in an easy to use database. So for any project, you can see from the first quarterly report until the last, all the lessons learned from that funded project. A really valuable resource for anyone looking to implement these projects. In addition to that, we try and collate some of the themes that we're seeing in the learning that comes out of the monitoring program, and we publish a newsletter outlining this every quarter. Again, this is for water company eyes only. There are some sensitivities around some of the information that we share, so we can't go more widely than that. But something there additional to support everyone's efforts in innovation, enabling lessons to be taken from one project and applied to another. So it's quite a busy space, the knowledge sharing space, but it is a space that is growing all the time, and we're also learning all the time about what is most valuable to users. And we will continue to refine these outputs to serve audiences in the best possible way. So just finally then, why are we putting so much emphasis on knowledge sharing and learning? And I suppose that there are many, many reasons, but maybe the most important, at least from our perspective at Ofwat, is that knowledge sharing, we feel, is the key to implementation, and implementation is the key to really unlocking the value the Innovation Fund and Spring has to offer. I've often said that by the time the Innovation Fund has come to its end, this will not be something that goes on forever, we are told. We don't want, nor can we afford to have 100 or so sort of white elephants, a bunch of lovely completed pilots which garner little follow-on or pick-up from the sector. I think the true test of the Innovation Fund's success is going to be to what extent we can convert the projects we've funded that have proven something positive into wide-scale adoption for the benefit of customers, society, and the environment. And why is this important? Well, because hopefully it will bring about the change that's needed to address the urgent challenges that the sector is facing. It's not the only way we're going to bring about this change, I shouldn't think, but we hope this will be an important part of that wider programme. And as we go about this, a key challenge for us is around ensuring knowledge sharing outputs are of high enough quality to be used by water companies interested in implementing these solutions. How do we therefore benchmark or measure the success of the knowledge sharing and demonstrate it is providing these efficiencies that we hope to see, such as removing duplication of effort and leading to change much, much faster. Now, I know Spring are looking at the impact of their knowledge showcases, and maybe there's a wider piece of work to do in the future to consider the impact of knowledge sharing in the ground. Another key question, I think, is what is Ofwat's role in supporting the sector to adopt those proven innovations at scale? We know that moving from piloting to implementation at scale is the hardest part of the innovation journey. And it is far too simple to assume that a proven idea with cost, efficiency, and environmental benefits will just sell itself. There are many other factors that need to align. For example, overcoming the risks around applying the solution at scale, the site-to-site variation that you'll see, asset, process, adaptation costs, training costs, the fact that often it's a slow return on investment. Can the supply chain always meet the need? And then you throw into the equation the pace of adoption being slowed potentially by procurement requirements, EA permitting, and other operational standards requirements. There's a lot that really needs to line up for us to move from that knowledge sharing piece into fully working implementation to see that impact. And so in AMP8, we will be introducing an implementation fund to help smooth the way to wide-scale adoption. Now, this may have a knowledge sharing emphasis, a heavy knowledge sharing emphasis, but it could be more than that. The programme is to be developed with the sector and your input over the next 6 to 12 months. So do support us in building this. We've got a few ideas, but we really need some help shaping this to be as effective as it can be. Now, we also need to recognise that it won't be the silver bullet to adoption. Ultimately, decisions rest with the water companies on what is important to them, cost, timing, and other concerns. But what can we do from the centre to help make it easier or faster through giving implementation some dedicated attention and some funding potentially? So I'll just finish by saying that we're really invested in this idea of collaboration, information sharing, and taking the sector forward as a collective. We also want to ensure the fund has meaningful impact and it provides value for money for customers. So do expect us to major more and more on speeding up adoption and implementation. But knowledge share really is at the centre of this, and that is why we're emphasising it so strongly today. And with that, I shall hand over to Kieran.
I think it's to Carly next.
Thank you. But Kieran, I would love to welcome you to the conversation as well. Thank you so much, Mark. Hopefully that's really helped with the why and Ofwat's perspective on knowledge sharing. But welcoming Kieran Brocklebank from United Utilities, we are going to do back-to-back in terms of this next part of the presentation. United Utilities have been very quick to adopt best practice knowledge sharing, hence why we thought it would be great to get Kieran to come and join this conversation, share his views on how are we actually delivering these best practice principles, what is his review of the state of our delivery against these best practice principles. It is very early days, so it's okay that we're not in a perfect place. So we're going to start with an honest view from Kieran once I've shared them with you. But before we hand over to Kieran, I wanted to start by walking you through the vision and the best practice principles that we're talking about here today. So the vision, this is our why. This is summarising what Mark has just been sharing with you. So the sector vision that we, Ofwat, Spring and water companies have all designed together is unlocking faster adoption by creating a world-class knowledge sharing culture. So unlocking faster adoption by creating a world-class knowledge sharing culture. That is our why. And to Mark's point, he mentioned that knowledge sharing is one of the keys to implementation. So it works alongside other pieces in the sector. So the key words here are that faster adoption. That is the implementation piece. Also world-class knowledge sharing. It's the quality piece that Mark was talking about as well. We need to make sure knowledge sharing is done at a quality where it can actually be utilised by those who want to learn. If we look at the principles themselves, so I'm going to go from left to right. So number one, learn from what already exists before committing to innovation projects. A really important one here. So questions you should ask yourself before you go and invest in something new. Do you have visibility of the current innovation landscape to confidently say that this hasn't already been done? There are many players delivering innovation out there. You have Ofwat Fund, you have Isle Utilities, you have other consultancies. Spring is trying to signpost to data on what already exists to support this principle. Principle 2, target insights to the right audience to meet objectives. So have you designed what success looks like? Have you established who the key audience is that you're trying to meet and how best they will receive the knowledge? Principle number 3, insights are regularly shared through multiple channels from day one of the project. So have you created a knowledge sharing plan and discussed the comms channels that you need to use? You have the Spring platform as part of the infrastructure to share knowledge, but there are other ways of doing this. Internal sharing, other external sharing, expert groups, conferences, media. There's lots of different channels that you can be using to share. And also sharing from day one of the project is really important. Historically, knowledge share has happened at the end of a project, but sometimes we're talking about 2-year projects, 5-year projects. We need to start sharing from the beginning of a project so that the sector is aware that it's happening and are with you on the journey that you're going on as you learn. Principle number 4, sector knowledge is open and centralised. So again, the Spring platform is one piece of infrastructure that's there, but there are many other places that you can link to. We need to make sure that we are signposting and centralising if things are in different places to make it easier for people who are seeking knowledge to find. Have you also shared all project collateral? So data, playbooks, any drawings, designs that are associated with the project? Is all of that material in one place and open and accessible for people to use? Principle number 5, insights from both innovation successes and failures are shared. So what were the lows? What were the highs? What did you learn along the way? What were the pivot points? What did you learn from those pivot points? What were the impacts to the project? Let's make sure that we are creating a narrative that shares both the great things that happened and some of the challenging things that happened. The challenging things can turn into great things because you learned from them and made things stronger in the project. Principle number 6, people are empowered to receive and embed lessons from external sources. So this was a key piece of feedback when we were talking to water companies about the principles, that we need resources to be set up in a way where they are flexible to come and learn from things that exist elsewhere. So is knowledge sharing embedded into job descriptions? Who is responsible for it in your business? And is everybody aware of that? So those are our 6 principles to set expectations on what good looks like. What are we going to be sharing? The themes of the Water Innovation Strategy. So for anybody who doesn't know, there is a Water Innovation Strategy that exists in the sector. It has 7 themes, everything from providing the services society, customers and society expect and value, all the way through to enabling diverse, future-ready people and partnership working. We will be sharing knowledge on the priority problems in the sector. So as I said, it's early days for us introducing this vision and principles into the sector, but I wanted to ask Kieran Brocklebank to join us and share his view of where we are currently at delivering against these principles. So Kieran, over to you.
Thank you, Carly, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever anyone is around the world. I'm delighted to be able to speak today. Thank you, Carly, for introducing it in the spirit that you have. This is a personal view. It's a view. I'm the head of innovation at United Utilities. We're very active in the Ofwat Fund. We're very active, like all water companies, in collaborating and sharing with each other. And so here's a quick view in classic operations red, amber, green assessment. Here we are in November 24, since the principles have been introduced. What's our assessment of how well we're doing? Pleased to report, certainly from my mountain, most of the principles I would say are being adhered to, green, good progress, still a bit more to do. Only a couple at amber status. Maybe we can go a bit faster, and maybe we've not got all the solutions in place for us to turn those ambers to green. But I know that we've got the dedication from the sector, water companies, academia, supply chain, consultancies, everyone associated, startups, mature companies. We know that we've got the sector and we know that we're aligning. Let me pick them off one by one then. So in terms of principle 1, learning from what already exists, I know that as water companies, we have not started new innovation projects on our own because we have been more open and shared and learned from others. Quite a few Ofwat bids have been proposed over the years, but because water companies come together, because we're pooling intelligence, because we're learning from each other, we're finding that we don't need to do those new innovation projects, new costs, new tests and trials. We can actually take the results from others that was already there. So much so that actually it's worth commenting, I think, that probably we weren't able to do this in the very first few rounds of the current Ofwat Innovation Fund. 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, we did not have that sharing culture as mature as it is today. So it was tricky to do that. There was a risk, therefore, that we were kickstarting things and committing to things without learning from what already exists. What's helping us right now is activities such as this spring snapshot exercise, which is a way for us to quickly and consistently and accurately share with each other so that we can all learn and we don't go into and commit brand new things. And what I'm also pleased to report on Principle 1 is Ofwat Challenge Works and their partners, they've recognised that actually we should force people to confirm that they've learned from others before committing to new ones. And that's why they've amended the submission form to close that gap. A great improvement, a green status. Let me move us on to an observation about Principle 2. This is about the insights going to the right audiences. I see this a lot. And so do my water company colleagues, and so do members of the supply chain in the feedback that they share with me. There are lots and lots now of material that's being shared publicly, openly, transparently. in centralized places, which therefore it's easier to access. And we see that a lot. There are case studies, there are video recordings, there are webinars, conferences. We've had whole tents at the Northumbrian Water Festival dedicated to sharing information about these things. We've had people putting in award submissions, which by their own right attract a different audience, attract high level of awareness, and they're all positive. What's worth observing here, I think, is sometimes the phrase the right audience, the right audience isn't always to the whole universe all at the same time once. Sometimes those audiences are quite niche. Let me give you some examples. United Utilities happens to have led a couple of the earlier projects, and one was all around creating a data set of wastewater network CCTV images about defects. Now, I can tell you that's quite a niche topic. So we found the right audiences to share that information with. And that's alongside sharing publicly, but we then went to niche audiences, open data groups, wastewater no dig and low dig conferences, CCTV hardware manufacturer groups. I mean, these are kind of groups that we would not normally attend, but we had something valuable to share. And so we found those audiences and we deliberately targeted them. For another example that you'll hear about today is our alternative phosphorus removal techniques, ALT-P as it's affectionately known. Well, that's been shared with environmental regulators as a niche audience, both national and local. And it's also been shared with some very specific technical phosphorus groups in the wastewater sector and bioresources. And so these are some quite interesting groups that maybe when we say, well, I've never heard of that, well, maybe it's because the right audience is not just one thing generally, it's some niche audiences as well. The third one then, and this is our first amber in my observations, this is about insights regularly shared, multiple channels. I've just mentioned some of those, but it's the bit about day one. I think there is a habit sometimes in innovation teams and others that really only share once the project is finished, once we've got full results. We daren't say that we're in progress on something. We don't want lots of people scrutinizing what we're doing until we're finished. We're still testing and proving concepts. And so the phrase day one can be quite tricky. But what we're learning with Spring's help is that there are some valuable things that can be shared. We can be sharing. Watch out for this project. We're going to be updating you in 6 months' time, and maybe we should be raising awareness of the project earlier like that. There are about 20 Ofwat funded projects that have already completed, labelled as completed, but we just don't have all of those insights at our fingertips right now from across the whole sector. Not everyone has managed to meet the best practice. And that's principally because this is the first time we've started identifying what best practice is. So it's unfair to judge those early first rounds on that. Excuse me. Just 1 second. Apologies for that. Someone trying to cold call and sell me something. Just got rid of them. So it's unfair to judge the first few projects, and we know that what we are going to do much more frequently is share and publish on things like the Spring websites or Stream, which is the open data sector. So we've got some good stuff there. Amber at the minute, we know that we can improve, we know that we can get better. Principle 4. There is lots and lots of routine sharing. We routinely report to Challenge Works, to Ofwat's partners on the Ofwat Fund, and some of that is just between us and Challenge Works. But over the time, we've got much more publicly available material, and that's summarised by Challenge Works and Ofwat. It's filtered from the water companies, from the project teams, and it's made public through things like the thematic learnings, through the Ofwat websites. We've got case studies on there. And I must say, we are, as water companies who happen to be leading most of the Ofwat Fund projects at the minute, we're sharing much more. And of course, when it comes to Ofwat Discovery, those aspects are being shared amongst water companies better as well. Principle 5, Amber. Not all the information is available on successes so far. Again, some of those first legacy projects, we just didn't collate information in that way. We didn't publish information in that way. But what's great is that we've now not only got the backing of Spring to be able to share those things, but we've got the backing of Stream as well, the other centre of excellence, this one niche audience around open data. Water companies, you know, used to meet, the innovation people used to meet infrequently, and an observation would be that our conversations were rather guarded with each other, didn't want to share too much. That's in the past. What's happening now is that we're meeting every fortnight, we're sharing, we're trying to get single voice on some topics, and we're definitely sharing successes and failures, whether that's conversations between people or more formally in the Ofwat reporting, in our case studies, in our Spring templates, in our showcases. Principle 6, people are empowered to receive and embed lessons. Well, what would those lessons be? Those lessons are things like how can you adopt some of these results? And I'm very pleased to report that we've got water companies adopting results from others. And that's really, really important. All water companies have conduits to reach other people. And that's really, really powerful. Some examples, the AI project I mentioned earlier. We know third parties have taken those results, they've updated their AI models, and they are now more effective. We know other water companies have taken our results on industrial symbiosis, and they've hardwired that into how they're working in AMP8. So people are empowered, and I would rate that as green. As a summary of all 6 principles, my observation is that we're on track, going well on the majority, and we know how to improve on a couple. Back to the main presenters, please.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kieran. Really appreciate you sharing your view. And as Kieran said, that's his personal view. You may agree, you may disagree. I can see some great comments in the chat around the principles and that review. Reminder, we will be going into breakout rooms, and that's where discussion will happen. So take your questions into those rooms. We're going to start now by sharing some real life examples of best practice and knowledge sharing. So I want to introduce the Anglian Water team, the Whole Life Carbon team. So Laura and Alex are going to spend 10 minutes walking us through the journey they've been on to share the knowledge from the Whole Life Carbon project that they've been working on. Thank you both. Over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Carly.
Morning. So yeah, my name's Laura. Well, I was Laura Taylor when I did the project. Now Laura Jones. I was the innovation project manager on this project, and I'm joined by my colleague Alex Herridge, who is a carbon and sustainability manager, who also supported the project. This was one of the first successful Ofwat funded projects to actually go out there. So this is our first experience in doing this. The project, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of the project, and then we'll talk within the slides and also cover a little bit more specifically around knowledge share at the end. So the project was initially created with the objective to visualise carbon and cost hotspots during early decision making within our capital delivery process, aligned with the past 2080 requirements. We worked with some water specific partners, specifically to pick up anybody who was on a different part of their journey to us. So we chose Affinity and Welsh Water because they were at a slightly different point compared to Anglian Water, and then we chose our technical partners to support Sweco, Skanska, the At1 and Brooklands, based on their level of expertise and previous experience, where we could sort of draw on that and bring it into the development of this project.
Thank you very much, Laura. Yeah, so I was going to take you briefly through sort of what the outcomes of the project were, we were aiming for, and the benefits that we were aiming to deliver. So to this point, we very much felt that we had a sort of a very siloed approach to capital and operational carbon, so building and operating our assets. And we wanted to bring that together to make better decisions using a more whole life carbon approach that the new 2023 version of the past 2080 standard was promoting, that there has been some previous UCWEAR work on, but that was very theoretical. We were aiming to make it more real life, to put it into the hands of designers, so when they do a design, they can see really what the carbon impacts of their decisions over the whole life of an asset. So the first part, as you can see at the bottom, was sort of creating the actual approach and helping people understand what we mean by whole life carbon to make it more visual and easier for people to understand. And then sitting behind that, the disparate data sets were creating problems for us on how we integrate into the BIM and visualization system. So we worked on the data structure, which sounds quite dry, but is super important for aligning all the different parts of the puzzle. So we brought all that together in a proof of concept digital tool, where we've got an example here. So we can see from this phosphorus removal project where actually which different parts of the assets are the most carbon intense, and therefore where there's most value to decarbonize and value engineer to improve both carbon and cost outcomes. But we think by making it more visual and reportable, it gives, rather than sort of a dry spreadsheet approach, then it should help engage everyone on that journey. Next slide, thank you. So we wanted to create sort of then to help everybody else apply this, both within water, but also with sort of half an eye on other sectors. So, for example, one of the reasons we chose Sweco and Skanska is because they also work outside of the water industry, and most of the principles and ideas we've put in place and suggesting and signposting apply to certainly most infrastructure projects, whether it's roads, rail, water, telecoms, but also sort of more widely within the built environment. So we've got those principles that we've tried to codify, and then lastly, but definitely not least, is the change framework of how you actually embed this within an organization. Because if it's not embedded within your decision-making processes, then actually it's very unlikely to result in real tangible carbon benefits. So it's clear who's responsible at each stage, what they need to be doing, how they're going to be reporting it, and what the outcomes are going to be.
Thank you. So within the project development, I feel like we initially probably started a little bit naive in terms of our knowledge share and best practice. So you can see here just a little bit through the journey of the project how the engagement tends to grow as the project develops. So pre-project, the engagement element was more focused around onboarding our partners during that scoping and design part of the project, and it was quite closed. Then within the project, once we were in flight, I think it was about a 3-year project in total. We were utilising best for task partners, as mentioned earlier. We did a re-engagement mid-year review with our key stakeholders, just to ensure that we were still delivering initially what we said, but also talk about any specific change. We did have quite a bit of staff turnover within the project team. So this was really important to make sure that everybody was still on track and that we were still meeting the requirements of the additional water companies that partnered with us. We had then regular project meetings within the delivery, and we did actually engage with another partner to test our hypotheses, as mentioned earlier, around that digital tool, just to make sure that the outputs that we were there aiming to deliver were transferable to a different business. And that was really useful to be able to say, okay, so we're going to deliver this playbook, which I'll come on to in a second, and we're going to deliver this approach. Can you follow it externally? And they absolutely could. So that really helped test our deliverables. And then post-project was when we started considering how we were going to start talking about this a little bit more. And that's where we actually engaged with Spring to get some support. So we then agreed we were going to do a soft launch, which was just to test how we were going to deliver. Then we went industry-wide and invited global partners from all over the world. We then focused on some technical surgeries to go into a little bit more detail around each of the specific work streams within the project so that people could apply it. And we looked at social media posts and looked at different website resources. Within this project, additional to that, Anglian Water were looking at how we could share some of this learning. And you can see there's a link to a web page there, the Innovation Hub. This is an external facing area whereby all of the completed Ofwat projects that Anglian Water are involved in will be publishing their resources there and they are accessible to anyone across the industry. So for future projects, taking into consideration everything that we've learned throughout this and thinking specifically around knowledge sharing and best practice, we've got some stop, start and continue, and it falls really nicely in with the principles that Kieran and Carly were talking about earlier on. So stop being quiet. The more vocal we are about the project, the better, particularly internally. I think we focus a lot on looking at external comms and communication, so more internal comms would be ideal as well. And that establishing a knowledge dissemination plan from the start. So that perhaps wasn't thought about initially. As I said, within the project development, we started thinking about how are we going to share this towards the end of the project. And it would be quite key to do that earlier on in projects next time. More regular communication with the external stakeholders. As I said, with staff turnover, it was a little bit challenging at times. So we absolutely need to plan for that more. And having an embedded change management part of the work stream from the outset. So we actually didn't have a change manager involved in our project, and that's something we recognised as something we would like to avoid in the future. And then continue some of the things we've done really well. So centralising, making our knowledge publicly available through that innovation hub. The technical surgeries were really good. We had quite a lot of external engagement with those. And then that general water sector focus, engage widely. I do think our engagement has been really successful due to the support from Spring. And it's really nice to be able to adopt that ourselves going forward. And I'm going to hand you over to you, I think. Thank you.
Oh, hi, morning everybody. My name's Richard Clark and I'm Programme Manager for Engineering Innovation at United Utilities. And I'm going to take, over the last few years, I've been leading the alternative approaches to phosphorus removal, rural wastewater treatment works. And you can see just on the opening slide here, put this up on purpose just to kind of help you understand where knowledge sharing has really hit home for us across the project. It hasn't been something that we've just waited for the outcomes of the project to come about and started doing. It's been something that's been very, very much with us at an early stage, even during the bid stages of the project. So before any funding was awarded to us. You can see our consortium partners across the bottom of the slide there. So, and it was really a challenge from the start when we were writing our proposal, just understanding how we were going to share knowledge between ourselves internally to the project, never mind the external outcomes of the project. So what you're looking at there is Woolton Wastewater Treatment Works or Liverpool South Wastewater Treatment Works. And that's where we had our main pilot area for our electrocoagulation units. And you can see there that we had a number of suppliers that provided pilot plants to help us understand phosphorus removal on the plant. And we needed to understand their ways of working, their standard ways of working, our standard ways of working, and how we were to interact to really provide a nice, efficient project delivery. You can also see in the background there the operational wastewater treatment works, another area of knowledge management that we needed to bring into play very early on within our project to make sure that our interactions with the operations team at Woolton were correct, that we weren't tripping over each other, that we weren't impacting on their day-to-day business as usual activities. So knowledge management very much in our minds, even at the bid stage before we started working as a project team. The project itself, so Old P, this was awarded, it was in 2021, and it looked at how we as a water industry could move away from our conventional go-to solution, which is metal-based coagulant dosing for phosphorus removal at the smaller wastewater treatment works, those rural wastewater treatment plants. And what we're talking about there is plants that are serving 5,000 population equivalent and below. So very much areas where we have customers that are impacted on our day-to-day activities through transport movements for deliveries of the likes of ferric sulfate to our sites and increased sludge production as a result of that. We looked at 3 different key areas. So our first work package, electrocoagulation, which you've just seen a photo of at Walton, we led that work package as United Utilities, and we had Kalina, Power and Water, Hydro Industries and Evergreen all provide us with electrocoagulation pilot plants, okay, which we operated alongside each other to see really how they to get a better understanding of operation of the electrocoagulation units. It wasn't necessarily about driving phosphate removal to as low as we could possibly get. It was absolutely about understanding the OPEX, so what maintenance requirements, how many operational hours, how much power was required to run the electrocoagulation processes. Our second work package looked at natural coagulants. So these are plant-based coagulants, seeing if they could offset some of our metal-based coagulant use. And we did this at Walton Wastewater Treatment Works, where we set up a pilot rig consisting of a dosing system and a lamella settlement tank. And we looked at a few different natural coagulants to see how they compared against ferric sulfate dosing. And then finally, we had work package 3, which was our reactive media work package, and our colleagues at Southern Water and the University of Portsmouth led that work package, looking at different reactive medias for phosphate removal, but also looking at what a best practice approach to testing of reactive medias should be for the UK water industry. And that's because we're having more and more suppliers come to us with different medias for testing, and we're trying to give them and share the knowledge that we already have within the water industry with them to give them a good start for when they come to us to test their medias. We had a number of different organisations just in the bottom right there that have helped us along the way, what we call advisory team members, and they've just helped us make sure that we're getting the direction of the project correct. And throughout the last few years, they've been very, very helpful in what they've done in the way of sharing knowledge into the project. So not necessarily just outgoing knowledge in respect to LP. There's very much been an influx of information as well to make sure that we're achieving what we set out to achieve and go a bit further for the water industry. What we achieved and what we set out to achieve, you can see in the table here on the left-hand side. So we said we'd do 12 months of trial for VC systems. We went beyond that. We actually achieved 14 months. We looked to remove phosphorus to below 1 milligram per litre, just to make sure to give everybody a target level of where we wanted to get to. We managed to succeed in that respect. And then we wanted to do a comparison of natural coagulant performance. Again, we demonstrated that at Walton. And then finally, in work package 3, we wanted to provide the water industry with that guidance for reactive media, and that's being developed. And we are actually coming to the end of this project now. We're just finalising our reports. So they can be made available through it would be the Spring platform. So we'll share that written knowledge out to the wider industry. But we've gone beyond that. We've achieved more for the water industry within this particular project. We've developed further innovation. So we've been able to, through sharing the knowledge throughout the project, we've been able to talk to our other water colleagues about in different water companies about what is next, what we should achieve next, how they can achieve what we've achieved within LP. We've managed to secure a nationwide agreement with Natural England and the Environment Agency with regards to the use of natural coagulants. Again, making sure that our regulators understand the knowledge that we've gained. We've shared that knowledge with them, and that's helped us move the regulatory framework forward around the use of what is a pioneering approach to phosphate removal within the water industry. And then we've been able to adapt and rapidly take up solutions that have come off the back of LP. So at United Utilities, we're looking at AMP7 projects where we've managed to fit these, particularly the natural coagulant solutions, into place on time for those programs. And we're also looking at our AMP8 program and where this all fits in. And now we've got solutions, actually named solutions off the back of ALT-P within our AMP8 program. So very much knowledge sharing internally within United Utilities, but also able to share that learning with others. Our approach for mechanisms we've used for knowledge sharing have been varied across the life of the project. I mentioned that at the beginning, when we were in the bid process, it was very much focused on how we were going to govern the project, how we were going to deliver, and that came about through our steering group sessions. They have continued throughout the project. We have quarterly steering group sessions where we can share our thoughts on the direction of projects and what we've learned across the different work packages. So very much an internal facing knowledge share there. We've had multiple site visits. There's been a lot of energy, a lot of positivity around what we've achieved and what we've been doing at site. So we've had several different teams come along and take a look at exactly what we've been doing within our pilot plants. We've done online showcases with Spring. We had a very successful, I think it's the second highest attended showcase of the 214 attendees for our ALT-P showcase a few months ago, back in August. And that just helped us to share what we'd done, but also have internal engagement. So things come into us again to understand what people are doing elsewhere. We got some good questions within the showcase session to help us again direct the project, make sure we're answering the questions that the water industry, the UK water industry, need us to answer within ALT-P. We've had lots of individual company consultations throughout the project. So people have come to us saying, can we learn a little bit more about what you're doing and understand how best we go about applying your learning to our own schemes, our own AMP7 and AMP8 schemes. Lots of media posts. So we're out there with iChemie, with GWI, press releases as well. And a lot of activity on LinkedIn. Again, just helping us to understand what others want from us. So great that we can share information out, but really, really powerful has been the information coming back in as well. So it's definitely been a two-way street with regards to knowledge share. And then finally, ALT-P Day. So that a big face-to-face session that we did in September, where we had 74 attendees come to see us at Lingley Mere in Warrington, and we were able to have discussions around what the future of phosphate removal should be. So again, sharing what we've done, but also receiving information back in. So just a final slide from me. Just what does this mean for the future? So our knowledge sharing activities, they've helped us discuss more with other water companies. So we've been discussing with Severn Trent Water, Northumbrian Water, Yorkshire Water as well now, and Power and Water and Veolia, who were both provided input to our project about what a combined electrocoagulation and natural coagulant system could look like. How do they complement each other from a technical point of view? And we're all interested in taking that learning, taking that knowledge, adapting it for the future. And those discussions under item 1 there have actually led into more open discussions around what else we are doing in the field of innovation within the water industry, and sharing our knowledge just over straightforward Teams calls, just learning what others are doing and what we've been doing, able to share a bit more outside of the ALT-P project. And then finally, as I mentioned, we're adopting these solutions. So particularly the natural coagulant side of things, so work package 2 outcomes really have helped us look to the future and understand how we can use our innovative solutions to achieve the outcomes of what is planned to be a very, very much larger program going forward into AMP8. So that's everything from me. I'm going to hand back to Carly now so she can take us over and take us into our breakout sessions. Thank you very much, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to Laura, Alex and Richard and the wider teams at Anglian and United Utilities for really embracing knowledge sharing and for coming and sharing your honest journeys of how knowledge sharing went for your projects. So we are going to move into breakout sessions now, and we will have 15 minutes in those breakout sessions. So what is the purpose of those breakout sessions? The purpose is to talk about knowledge sharing and to learn from the knowledge sharing journeys from each of these projects. We're going to have people from these projects in each of the breakout sessions. So the questions should be focused in on knowledge sharing. What are these sessions not? They are not time for you to debate the results, the projects, the approaches, the technical side of things. So please be respectful of that. These sessions are to talk about knowledge sharing for the projects. So we've got 15 minutes and our lovely tech support are going to transfer us all into breakout rooms, and then we will be back together in 15 minutes where we will share feedback and results and questions with each other before I start to wrap up. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Did that feel like 2 minutes to everyone else as well? Just to finish off the sentence I was just saying, because this is relevant for any group, if there were questions that you didn't get answered in there, feel free to drop them in the chat, tag people, we'll pick up after this session and we'll try and respond to the remaining questions in the best way that we can. So what we wanted to do was just spend 5 minutes getting some feedback from some of the facilitators from the groups. Mark, Hannes, Jeanette, Henderson, I'm going to hand over to both of you and see if you've got some key messages, lessons, observations that you want to share from your groups.
Shall I go first, Mark? One of the things that was coming out in our group was very much about how do you get access to the information and how easy is it to access that information. So it can be a real challenge to find things if they're not properly tagged, if there isn't a knowledgeable person who can actually point you in the right direction. Think old libraries who used to have a librarian who could actually send you to the right place. We now have a plethora of information online. How do you actually find it? How do you make it available? Is it actually via a knowledgeable person who can share that information? How do we actually make things much more visible? I think that's definitely something for us at Ofwat with the way we're sharing information about the projects. But how can we promote where information is about this? That was kind of my key takeaway. I don't know whether anyone else had anything else. Or Mark. You're on mute, Mark.
On mute, Mark.
One day I will conquer the mute button. So we had a couple of things. We had a couple of really interesting sort of split between water companies and non-water companies. On the non-water company side, really interested in how they best present their knowledge sharing activity in a future Ofwat Innovation Fund bid. And secondly, at what point do they engage Spring to support in that? So I thought that was useful. Really interesting comment, I think, from Ooman, who left us with a couple of good questions to ponder, which is what is high enough quality in terms of knowledge sharing information? How do we know we're doing a good job at this? And linked to that, what is enough then for water companies and anyone else to do something meaningful with that, take action as a result? So I think probably they are. One final thing, the implementation. We talked a little bit about how we bridge that gap, and I think Moomin's points talk to that as well. How do we effectively support that move from pilot testing all the way through to implementation and doing something at scale?
Wonderful, thank you, Mark. Dan, do you have a key message insight from your breakout group? Are you there, Dan?
You're on mute, Dan.
Apologies, I'm on mute there. Yeah, so I think we covered various different topics. I think one of them, the points we brought up is about the culture change and how you can break down barriers, be by leading by example, proving where the benefits are in knowledge sharing as a whole. I think almost sort of removing that sort of competition element as well, so everyone can sort of quicker accelerate progress and quicker get to adoption. I think the other point that Andrew sort of brought up as well is about that sort of I think within our sort of area here with the innovation managers, I think it can be in somewhat an echo chamber in some ways, and knowledge can be, although it's an enabler, it's not an accurate point. So it's how do we sort of get the messaging across to sort of senior level execs as well. So that's kind of getting the attention was a big part of the discussion that we had.
Wonderful, brilliant, thank you, Dan. And in our group, I asked the project team, so Alt-P and Whole Life Carbon, if they have one piece of advice for people on knowledge sharing, what would that piece of advice be? And they both agreed that it was, don't underestimate the efforts that are required for high quality knowledge sharing, and make sure you plan for that at the very beginning of a project. You need to make sure there's enough budget in the project plan to be able to do high quality knowledge sharing. You need to make sure the resources are allocated to be able to do it. So we had a good discussion around that. There were many questions we didn't get to. So as I said, please pop those in the chat and we'll do our best to come back to those. So what I wanted to start doing was sort of wrap up and talk about next steps and where we go from here, just over the last 10 minutes that we've got together. So when we created the vision and best practice principles, we wanted them to be a North Star, but high level enough that we are not limiting creativity. So we wanted them to allow creativity, because knowledge sharing needs an element of creativity to it. So we want to be clear on what expectations are, however, allow space for people to deliver knowledge sharing in a way that works with the strengths of that company. But we now have this vision and principles, and what we've just heard in those groups is that we might still need to be a little bit clearer on what high quality looks like. We need to be clear on access to information. So where is the information? We need to dedicate budget accordingly, and we need to dedicate resources accordingly to make sure that we are doing high quality knowledge sharing. We also need to make sure that cultural change is happening as well. And creating these principles and the vision are part of that cultural change. But as I mentioned up front, they're only as valuable as the implementation of them. Just creating them doesn't change the culture. So they need to be embedded in everyday work. And earlier, myself and Mark both mentioned that earlier this year, we held a session with senior leaders to talk about commitment to these vision and principles. And I wanted to share some of the things that those senior leaders have signed up to do. So one of the pieces around this is all around communications. So we need to make sure that within water companies, we are sharing these vision and principles, that internal comms team are communicating across the business so that the right resources know what expectations are. We need to cascade this through the company. So we will be working with water companies to continue that. We need champions for knowledge sharing in organisations as well, whether that's suppliers or water companies or other. But within water companies, we need heads of service to really champion knowledge sharing so that resources feel empowered to both share, but also go and learn from what others have done as well. Processes is another part of this. So senior leaders talked about what updates can they make to internal processes to make sure people are checking for what exists before going and investing in something new. We all know it's really exciting to go out there and solve a problem, and we all want to be the one who solves a problem. But there is also excitement to going and finding something that already exists, and therefore you can implement it faster. Callum from United Utilities was telling us a story in our breakout group about how other water companies are now implementing the insights from the Alt-P project faster than United Utilities did, because they've learned from the process that United Utilities went on. And that's ultimately what we want from this, is others speeding up their journey and learning from each other. So we need to make sure the processes in organisations allow for that to happen. Resources was a big conversation we had with senior leaders as well. So, you know, in terms of short-term change that can be made, we make sure that the resources are written into the Ofwat bids. There is clear requirement in the Ofwat bid for knowledge sharing, and we need to make sure that the right level of resource to meet best practice knowledge sharing is built into your bids. But longer term, we need this cultural change to happen around resources being able to seek knowledge and have flexible work requirements where they can change path if the value is evidence and it makes sense for a different solution to be implemented. We need them to have space and capacity to go and learn from others and bring that back into the business, and to know that proposed change is an accepted conversation in the business and that the business supports the change. So there's a lot of things that are happening in terms of changes that will help create this culture of knowledge sharing. This will be a continuous journey for Spring, for Ofwat, for water companies, for suppliers, for the whole ecosystem to actually implement change from this. The first barrier we came across to this was understanding of expectations, and we're hoping that today's session, alongside other work that we're doing, helps to align us all on what expectations are for knowledge sharing in the sector. We're going to share some links in the chat. Some have already been shared, but we can do it again in case you've missed things Spring can help you with. So there is an article that we published around knowledge sharing that has the vision and principles in. We can share a link to that. The knowledge library, which has been talked about a lot today, that is an open platform resource for anybody to use. There are case studies in that library. There are also recordings of all the knowledge share events that we do in that library. So you can go in and search by water innovation strategy theme. So for example, net zero or resilient infrastructure, and you can find all the knowledge that relates to that topic. So please use that resource. It is there to help you all. We also have a regular list of upcoming showcases. So showcases are the 2-hour sessions that we run that are live with the project team. So that's water company, supplier, any other stakeholders involved, to share their journey. What were they trying to achieve? What did they achieve? What barriers did they come across? How did the adoption of it go? What lessons can be learned to help others move faster through the process? So we can share more information on those upcoming showcases as well. And if you want to talk to us about what best practice looks like, please reach out to us. Myself, Dan, in Spring, any other of the Spring team can help walk you through what best practice looks like and make sure that it's built into the beginning of your Ofwat bids and that you've got enough resource and budget built into those bids. So just to wrap up then, a reminder of our vision here. We want to unlock faster adoption by creating world-class knowledge share culture in the sector. All of our small actions towards that vision help us to create bigger value here. So the fantastic work that we've seen on this call today help to create bigger value. All the pieces of knowledge share that are going on around the sector, centralizing that and bringing it all together helps us to create this space of accessible and open knowledge. And ultimately, we want to create more value for society, the environment, and customer. So I'm just going to say a huge thank you to everybody involved in today's call. So thank you to the Spring team behind the scenes. Thank you very much to our project teams from Anglian Water, United Utilities. Thank you to everybody that's been involved in creating the vision and best practice principles. So that's innovation managers from water companies, senior leaders in water companies, Ofwat, and specifically a big thank you to Ofwat as well. This partnership that we've developed between Spring and Ofwat, I think, is a real example of how the ecosystem needs to work together to evoke change. Because this is all about an ecosystem effort. Not one party is going to be able to change this themselves. So working with Ofwat, Spring and water companies together is creating this cultural shift that we really need to see in this space. And lastly, thank you to everybody who is on the call, who's been listening, contributing. We really hope that some of what you've heard today can help you go back into your businesses, whether that be water company, supplier or other, and actually start to embed cultural change around knowledge sharing, start to improve knowledge sharing that's happening. And we're here to help you with any of the conversations that you want to have going forwards. As I said, we'll also try and get back to the questions that we've got in the chat, but please reach out to us in the future with any questions that you have. Big thank you to everybody, and we will talk to you all soon. Goodbye.